So in a few hours, House managers will use their third and final day to explain why President Trump's actions warrant removal from office. They focused yesterday on outlining the president's alleged abuse of power. The president has continuously railed against the case, and there's news today about a strong message being sent out about supporting the president. So Nancy Cordes is on Capitol Hill. Nancy, what is that all about?
Well, a presidential confidant tells CBS News that Republican senators have been told that if they vote against the president at the end of this trial, their heads will be on a pike. At this point, at least the senators who are talking to us appear to be firmly in his corner if they're on the Republican side. But there are others who have kept mum and who are focusing on these proceedings very closely. Yesterday, as you mentioned, was all about abuse of power. The House impeachment managers laying out all the evidence they have on that front. Today, they turn to Article 2, obstruction of Congress. And then we move to the defense.
This is corruption and abuse of power in its purest form.
The House impeachment managers laid out Thursday how they say the president used his position to benefit himself.
The quid pro quo was discussed in text messages, emails, voicemails, calls, and meetings amongst top administration officials and top Ukrainian officials.
The only person who stood to benefit from the abuse of office and solicitation of these investigations was Donald Trump.
After more than 16 hours, some of their arguments have grown familiar.
President's own words to President Zelensky on the July 25th call.
You look at that July 25th call.
So when President Trump asked for a favor on a July 25th call.
And while some Republicans, like Senators Collins and Murkowski, have appeared to pay close attention, others flicked fidget spinners.
It is the same thing day after day after day. Rinse it, recycle it, and repeat it.
Senate Democrats cried foul.
Well, you're the ones who voted against new evidence, new testimony, new documents. So they are being duplicitous and hypocritical.
They pointed to a new poll that shows 7 in 10 Americans want to hear from witnesses.
He covered it up. He obstructed us. He's trying to obstruct you. And he's violated the Constitution.
Democrats also tried to head off any attacks on the Bidens.
The allegations against Vice President Biden are groundless.
But the president's defense team said the impeachment managers had brought them up first and they're fair game.
They kind of opened the door for that response, so we'll determine as a defense team the appropriate way to do it.
The question now, are any of the 100 jurors still undecided?
I want to end this thing sooner rather than later.
What should the American people make of the fact that so many senators appear to have already made up their minds long before this trial is even over?
There are some, but the weight of history, the weight of that trial, the requirement that people are forced to sit at their desks and listen is very, very powerful.
All right, Nancy. So we just heard, Senator Schumer say that the senators are forced to sit at their desk and listen. But very early on, we were hearing that they're not really sitting at their desk. And, the idea of maybe standing up once in a while at the back of the room, that makes sense. You got to stretch. But now we're hearing that, sometimes senators are getting up and leaving the room and they're leaving for a long time. Why aren't why are they not being forced to stay in their seats?
That is a great question because, you hear the Senate Sergeant-at-Arms warn them every day that, on pain of imprisonment, they need to sit in their seats and they need to be quiet. And yet we're starting to see senators pass notes, read books. They've got candy stashes that they're handing out. Some of them, as I mentioned, are flicking fidget spinners. Some of them are coming back late from the breaks. One senator, Tom Tillis of North Carolina, inexplicably decided to watch a portion of the proceedings last night, not from his seat, but from the Senate gallery up above the Senate floor. And that's where reporters usually sit. And everyone was wondering why he was sort of taking in the proceedings from a completely different vantage point. No explanation for why the rules appear to have been relaxed. The person who's presiding over this trial, the Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, John Roberts, hasn't really had anything to say publicly about it. At this point, we're not hearing any outbursts really from the senators. They are remaining more or less quiet, but they do seem to be looking for ways to bend the rules a bit, if you will.
Right. And we also saw in your story a couple of Republican senators, and there's several more, complaining that, this stuff is repetitive. They've heard it already. There's nothing new here. And then right at the kind of very end, it was Senator Gillibrand who basically said, hey, you could hear new evidence if you just voted in favor of allowing us to submit new evidence. So I'm wondering, is that something that the Democrats are considering pushing for as we move through this process? Or have they decided, look, that horse has left the barn, the Republicans are never going to allow us to submit new evidence, so we'll just let it go?
Nothing infuriates Democrats more, Anne-Marie, than Republicans who argue that all of this is repetitive and they aren't hearing anything new. Democrats say, hey, you have the option to hear plenty of new information. You just have to vote to do it. And as you know, Senate Republicans voted repeatedly at the start of this trial not to secure new documents, new testimony, at least for now. Democrats are going to have another shot, and they are certainly going to keep pushing for it. As the Democratic leader, Chuck Schumer, told us yesterday, he believes that the facts are on his side. He believes the public is on his side. And if you look at the polls, he's right. He says he's not convinced that he is going to be able to win over 4 Republicans at the end of the day to call for new documents and witnesses, but he isn't convinced that he won't be successful either. What I can tell you is that most Senate Republicans are growing increasingly firm about the fact that they would open up a whole new can of worms if they were to allow new witnesses. And that's because the president has signaled that if John Bolton is called to testify, for instance, his former national security advisor, that he might try to exert executive privilege, which would then lead to another court battle, just like we saw brewing during the House impeachment inquiry. And that court battle could stretch out for months. And you've got a lot of Senate Republicans saying, do we really want to allow this trial to drag on any longer than necessary? So they're going to be trying to make the case to some of their wavering fellow Republicans, don't go there because you're going to tie us up for a really long time.
So Senator Schumer, in fact, though, told reporters yesterday that he had new testimony from an aide of Vice President Pence. What do we know about this? Is this the same aide that actually testified publicly in front of one of the House committees?
Yes, Jennifer Williams. She testified before the House, and after she testified, she handed over a document to the investigators that had to do with a conversation that Vice President Pence had with the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. We don't know what that document says. It was marked classified by the White House. Democrats and the House impeachment managers have tried to urge the White House to declassify the document. They say that there's no secret confidential information in the document. It's just information that the White House doesn't want the public or the senators to see. Nevertheless, the document remains confidential, but the senators agreed the other night to allow it into evidence, so they can now go view this document in a secure room here at the Capitol if they want to. But since we don't know what the document says, it's hard to say whether it's going to have any impact on their deliberations.
Right. Okay, Nancy Cordes, thank you.
You're welcome.